The judge almost believed him until I played the voicemail. He didn't know I had. My parents died 6 months apart. First dad, heart failure in March, and then mom, who just never seemed to recover. By September, I was the last one left in the house I'd grown up in. Grief is a strange thing. It comes in waves and shadows, sometimes sneaking in while you're doing something as stupid as loading the dishwasher. Sometimes it waits until you're finally starting to feel okay. I was still in the middle of probate, handling all the paperwork no one ever tells you is endless. Death, it turns out, is not the end of anything. It's just the beginning of phone calls and signatures in cold offices with flickering fluorescent lights. So when I got the letter from my cousin David's lawyer claiming he was the rightful heir to the house, I thought it was a mistake, a clerical error, maybe some misunderstanding. David and I were never close. He was 10 years older than me, always the golden boy at family reunions. The successful one. Sales, I think. Something to do with medical equipment. He wore suits that cost more than my car and always brought some stunning girlfriend who barely spoke. He used to call me kid, in a way that made it sound like an insult. But after my parents died, he showed up at the funeral, gave me a big hug, told me if I ever needed anything to call. I hadn't, and apparently he'd decided that what he needed was the house. I took the letter to my attorney, Martha, who had been friends with my mom since college. She read it twice, frowning the whole time, then sighed. "She's claiming there was an addendum to your father's will," she said slowly, naming him as the beneficiary of the house. "There was no addendum," I said. "Well, according to this, there is now." The hearing was set 3 weeks later. David showed up in court wearing a navy suit and the smug grin of someone who thinks they've already won. His lawyer was slick, young, and the kind of guy who referred to the judge as Your Honor, in a tone that managed to sound both respectful and condescending. I had Martha. She had a deep folder and decades of legal experience. But David had something stronger. He had the story. His lawyer painted a picture of a dying man, my father, allegedly struggling with guilt over how he had handled his estate. Apparently, he'd had second thoughts. He wanted David, the son he never had, to have the house. And supposedly, 2 weeks before he passed, my father had written and signed an addendum to his will, leaving everything to David. It was a beautifully rehearsed narrative. He even had 2 witnesses, old colleagues of David's, who testified they were present when my father signed the new document. "They were just looking out for me," David said softly, looking directly at me. "Uncle Jim told me he was worried about her, that she wasn't ready. He asked me to take care of things." The judge was quiet. He kept taking notes, asking questions. I could feel the tide shifting. My pulse thudded in my ears. After the hearing, I walked out into the hallway and felt like I was floating. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking. "You okay?" Martha asked gently. I wanted to scream. "How can they believe him? He's got witnesses, a signed document, and a lot of charm," she said bitterly. "Charm goes a long way, but it's fake. I believe you. But believing and proving are 2 different things." Over the next few days, I called everyone I could think of who might have been around in Dad's final weeks. Nurses, neighbors, friends. Most said the same thing. He didn't mention David. He barely mentioned anyone. He was tired. He was quiet. Then one night, I was sitting in Dad's old recliner in the den, drinking tea that had long gone cold, scrolling through old voicemails on my phone. I don't know why. Nostalgia? Punishment? Some part of me missed hearing his voice, even if it was just him reminding me to pick up milk. That's when I found it. A voicemail I didn't remember, dated 5 days before he passed. "Hey, kiddo, listen, I'm not feeling great today, but, just wanted to say, if anything happens to me, don't trust David. He came by today, asking questions, said some weird stuff about the house. I don't like it. Just be careful, okay? And don't let him get to you. Love you." I sat there, frozen. My tea spilled onto the carpet and I didn't even notice. He knew. Dad knew. I played it again, then again. Every word drilled into my spine. He knew David would come for the house, and he tried to warn me. My hands shook as I saved the message, downloaded it to my computer, then uploaded it to 2 separate cloud accounts. I sent a copy to Martha with the subject line, "We need to talk." The next morning, we met in her office. She listened to the voicemail 3 times. "This changes everything," she whispered. "If we can prove the voice is his, and the date lines up, it throws serious doubt on David's claim." "We can," I said. "We have audio analysis. We have the original voicemail metadata. I'll do whatever it takes." Martha leaned back in her chair, a smile ghosting across her face. "Well," she said softly, "looks like your father left us a key witness after all." The days leading up to the next hearing crawled by like a nightmare in slow motion. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I was sleeping less than 4 hours a night, replaying the voicemail in my head over and over again like some desperate mantra. I started carrying earbuds with me, just so I could listen to it privately when I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my dad knew what was coming. Martha had already submitted a motion to have the voicemail admitted into evidence. David's legal team, of course, objected immediately. They claimed it was inadmissible hearsay, potentially fabricated, and irrelevant to the validity of a signed legal document. The judge hadn't ruled on it yet. Meanwhile, David was everywhere. He'd started reaching out to family members, distant aunts, second cousins, feeding them his version of the story. I started getting texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years, asking why I was dragging this out, why I couldn't just do the right thing and let David handle the estate. It was like being erased in real time, like he was editing me out of my own family. Only one person stood by me the entire time. Mrs. Clark, our next-door neighbor for over 30 years. She was in her late 70s, used a walker, and smelled permanently of lavender and mothballs, but she had a memory like a vault. "I saw him, you know," she told me one morning over tea. "David, coming out of your house, a few days before your father passed." I blinked. "You did?" "Oh, yes," she nodded fiercely. "Didn't look right. He was smug, like a cat that ate the canary. I asked how your father was, and he didn't even answer. Just got into his car and drove off. I asked if she'd testify. She said yes, without hesitation." Martha was more skeptical. "They'll tear her apart on the stand," she warned me. "She's old, uses a walker. They'll claim her memory is unreliable, say she confused dates, or imagined the whole thing. But she saw him," I said. "She's telling the truth." "I know, and we'll include her statement. But we need something stronger, something they can't dismiss." So we got it. We hired an independent audio forensics expert, a guy named Nathan from Boston, who had testified in federal cases. He analyzed the voicemail, confirmed it hadn't been altered, and cross-referenced it with existing recordings we had of my dad. His report was gold. "The voice is consistent with James Carter, deceased March 18th, he wrote. "There is no evidence of audio manipulation. The voicemail is authentic." Still, David wasn't slowing down. He filed another motion, this time accusing me of elder abuse, that I had manipulated my father into changing the will in my favor, then hidden the so-called real version. I nearly threw up reading it. The audacity. Martha told me not to react. "He's scrambling. He knows we have something he doesn't." But the damage was being done. Online, someone, probably David or his lawyer, leaked court documents. People were commenting on Reddit threads with my name, calling me a thief, a manipulator, a con artist. My job, freelance graphic design, suffered. Clients stopped responding. A major project I was working on suddenly went in another direction. Every day felt like drowning in invisible ink. I couldn't scream loud enough to prove the truth. The worst moment came when my dad's old friend, Ken, someone I thought of like an uncle, called me and said, "I don't know what to believe anymore. Jim trusted David, you know. Said he was always the responsible one." My throat closed. "He didn't. He called him a liar. He left a message." Ken cut me off. "I just hope you're not making things worse." Click. That night, I stared at the voicemail again. My father's voice, weak but clear, repeating the same warning. "Don't trust David. He wants the house." What haunted me wasn't just that he said it. It was the tone. Tired. Resigned. As if he knew no one would believe me. As if he knew David would win unless I did something drastic. That was when I realized something else. David didn't know about the voicemail. He couldn't know. If he did, he would have already tried to get it suppressed or at least spun a defense. But he hadn't mentioned it once. That was my advantage. At the next hearing, David swaggered in like a man who'd already picked out furniture for his new home. He wore a gray three-piece suit and had the nerve to wink at me before sitting down. Martha leaned in and whispered, "Stay calm, he's bluffing." The judge opened the session by announcing that the voicemail would be admitted into evidence pending the expert testimony. David's lawyer stood up immediately, sputtering, "Your Honor, this is outrageous. The emotional distress this could cause." The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Holloway, I'll hear objections in the appropriate phase. Sit down." For the first time, David looked unsure, just for a second. His jaw tensed. I could almost feel the shift. The cracks in his story were beginning to show. But we weren't done yet. Outside the courtroom, while waiting to be called for testimony, David approached me. No lawyers, no crowd, just him and me. "You should drop this," he said calmly. I said nothing. "Seriously, it's not worth it. You're not going to win, you know. All you'll get is more of your name dragged through the dirt." "You're afraid," I said. He laughed. "Of what? Your little voice clip? That told me everything." He didn't know what was on it. I leaned in, looked him straight in the eyes and said, It's not a little voice clip, it's our uncle's voice, 5 days before he died, saying your name, saying he didn't trust you. David's face went pale, just for a moment. Then he sneered and walked away. But I knew. The panic had started. David didn't show up for the next pretrial conference. His lawyer appeared alone, flushed and slightly disheveled, citing a family emergency. Martha smirked beside me. Emergency, huh? Maybe someone finally realized his lies have an expiration date. We moved forward. The voicemail was officially authenticated by Nathan's report. The court accepted it as credible and allowed us to submit it as supplemental evidence. It wasn't a smoking gun on its own, but it cracked the foundation of David's narrative. Martha wasted no time. She filed a petition to have the validity of the supposed addendum questioned in light of the new evidence. The judge granted a special hearing to examine the voicemail, the audio forensics, and the process by which David had obtained the new will. David's lawyer attempted another delay tactic, this time claiming that David was under extreme emotional distress and requesting that the hearing be pushed by 30 days. Denied. Things were starting to turn. Still, the days felt endless. I spent them gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. Emails from my dad, old voicemails, handwritten notes in the margins of his journals, anything that could prove consistency in his thinking. He never once mentioned David, not once. He talked about me, though. My work, my anxiety, how proud he was that I was managing so much on my own. He left to-do lists addressed to me, labeled folders, little stick-it notes that said things like, for her, and she'll know what to do. But David? Nothing. Martha told me that wasn't uncommon. Liars insert themselves into people's legacies. It's not enough to have the money. They need the story. They need the myth that they were always meant to have it. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. My brain was running marathons. My father's voice kept replaying in my mind, over and over, like some ghost whispering truths into a courtroom too far away. When I walked into the building that morning, the first thing I noticed was how small David looked. Not physically. He was still tall, sharp-suited, slick, but something about him had shrunk. The arrogance was cracking. He didn't meet my eyes. That hearing is seared into my memory. Nathan took the stand first, calm, clinical, and devastating. He walked the judge through the technical analysis of the voicemail, the waveform consistency, the metadata timestamps. Then he played it. The courtroom was still. My father's voice came through the speakers, tired, raspy, but firm. I don't trust David. He came by today, asking questions, said some weird stuff about the house. I don't like it. Just be careful, okay? And don't let him get to you. Love you. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat still and watched David's face. He blinked rapidly, adjusted his tie, shifted in his seat. Martha asked Nathan if there was any sign of tampering. None, he said. This voicemail is genuine. David's lawyer tried to discredit him during cross-examination, suggesting he could have been paid, that the data could be faked. Nathan didn't flinch. If you're accusing me of criminal misconduct, I suggest you speak very carefully. The courtroom tensed. Mrs. Clark was next. She walked slowly, supported by a cane, but stood tall in her truth. She recounted what she saw. David leaving the house days before Dad died, his expression, his refusal to speak. David's lawyer rolled his eyes. Literally. I wanted to punch him. Mrs. Clark, he said, oozing false charm. You're sure it wasn't a different day? Perhaps another nephew? I've known that boy since he was in diapers, she snapped. Don't you dare imply I don't know what I saw. He didn't know how to respond to that. Next, it was Martha. She laid out everything. The timeline, the contradictions in David's narrative, the lack of prior communication, and the fact that David's witnesses had questionable ties to him. One of them, it turned out, had been fired from his job for fraud 2 years ago. The other, he shared a business address with David's sales company. We requested a handwriting analyst to examine the signature on the addendum. Preliminary results showed inconsistencies, pressure changes, angle deviations, and ink flow that suggested possible tracing. The judge looked pained. He leaned back, folding his hands. I'm going to allow a full review of the document's legitimacy, he said finally. And I want both parties to submit all relevant financial communications, messages, and records by the end of the week. David stood up. Your Honor, this is a witch hunt. She's fabricating evidence to smear me. Mr. Holloway, the judge said sharply. Sit down. David sat, but he glared at me like he wanted to set me on fire. That night, I got a message. Blocked number. Voicemail. I almost didn't listen to it. But something made me press play. It was David. I hope you're proud of yourself. You really want to win that bad, huh? You think you're better than me? You think you deserve that house? I built something, you leech. I earned my place. You were always the weak one. If you play that message again in court, I swear. The recording cut off. No threats. But the tone was enough. I forwarded it to Martha. Her reply was one line. Let him talk himself out of his own defense. The morning of the final hearing was gray and heavy. Rain tapped against the courthouse windows like fingers drumming out a warning. I sat quietly beside Martha, my palms damp, my heart an endless drum roll inside my ribs. David entered 5 minutes late, no tie this time. His hair wasn't quite perfect, and he looked thinner. Maybe it was just the lighting, or maybe, finally, the weight of his lies had started to settle on him. He didn't look at me. The courtroom was nearly full. Local reporters had picked up the story. Not the family drama, but the rare legal case involving alleged will fraud, falsified witness testimony, and a last-minute voicemail from beyond the grave. Court is now in session, the clerk announced. David's attorney opened with a passionate speech, a performance. He painted David as the overlooked nephew, the faithful son figure, the man burdened with responsibility in the final days of his beloved uncle's life. James Carter knew who he could count on, the lawyer said. He knew who was dependable. He didn't want his home, his legacy, falling into incapable hands. I stared at him in disbelief. Incapable? Martha leaned toward me, whispered, He's pushing the irresponsible daughter angle. Let him keep digging. Then David was called to the stand. He adjusted his cuffs, cleared his throat, and launched into his carefully rehearsed version of events. I came to visit Uncle Jim several times in his last month, he said. He was worried about the house, about how things would be handled. He wanted me to step in. Did he ever express concern that his original will might not reflect his wishes? His lawyer asked. David nodded solemnly. Yes. That's why he had me bring in my friends, Rick and Tony, as witnesses when he signed the addendum. Were you compensated in any way? I only wanted to honor his legacy. When cross-examination began, Martha stood slowly. She didn't raise her voice, didn't pace. She just walked up and stood in front of him, calm and deadly. Mr. Holloway, when exactly did your uncle sign the alleged addendum? March 13th, 5 days before he passed? Yes. You're certain of the date? I am. Were you aware that on March 13th, Mr. Carter was admitted to county hospital with advanced heart failure and was sedated for nearly 18 hours? David blinked. I was there. Before that. Before the sedation? Yes. So you were present the morning of March 13th? David paused. Yes. Martha raised an eyebrow. Because according to hospital visitor logs, no one by your name checked in or out that day. David shifted in his seat. I used the side entrance. He didn't want many people to know I was there. I see, Martha said, letting the silence hang. And these witnesses you brought, Rick and Tony, how do you know them again? They're former co-workers, friends. Would you say they're close friends? I guess. Would you say they'd do you a favor, even if it meant stretching the truth? Objection, David's lawyer snapped. Speculative. Sustained, the judge said. Martha turned to the bench. Your Honor, we request to admit supplementary evidence challenging the authenticity of the addendum. Proceed, the judge said. She distributed the documents, handwriting analysis, expert reports, phone records. She didn't rush. Each piece was another brick in the wall we were building. Mr. Holloway, are you familiar with this voicemail? She asked, holding up the printout of the transcript. David's eyes flickered. No. Then I'll play it now. I held my breath. It was the same voicemail, my dad's voice, quiet but firm. Don't trust David. He came by today, asking questions. Said some weird stuff about the house. I don't like it. Just be careful, okay? The silence afterward was thicker than any courtroom silence I've ever known. David's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is emotionally manipulative, unverified audio. The audio has been authenticated by a certified expert, Martha interrupted. Its metadata confirms the date. It directly contradicts Mr. Holloway's timeline. David stood up, his face flushed. This is ridiculous. You're going to believe a dead man over 2 living witnesses? The judge held up a hand. Mr. Holloway, sit down. He sat. But it was over. You could feel it in the room. The tide had shifted, finally and completely. I will issue a ruling within the next 72 hours, the judge said. This court is adjourned. Outside the courtroom, David walked right past me. His expression was unreadable. Somewhere between fury and fear. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Martha turned to me, a satisfied glint in her eye. Well, she said, I'd say your father spoke louder today than David ever could. I didn't reply. I was too busy trying to hold back the tears. Not from sadness, from release, from knowing at last that the truth had been heard. The verdict came in exactly 72 hours later. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, hands clenched around the steering wheel, while Martha ran inside to collect the documents. She emerged 10 minutes later with a subtle smile that gave everything away before she even spoke. "You won," she said simply. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the wetness drip off my jaw. The floodgates opened so fast I couldn't even stop it. The relief wasn't sweet. It was raw, ugly, exhausting, like someone had just cut through 6 months of tightly bound rope around my chest. The judge's decision was thorough. He declared the addendum invalid, citing inconsistencies in the signatures, the questionable credibility of the witnesses, and the newly discovered voicemail. He commended Martha's team for their diligence and requested an investigation be opened into the creation of the forged document. David was now facing charges for fraud, obstruction of justice, and perjury. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne or call everyone I knew. I went home. To my house. My father's house. The house David tried to steal with charm and manipulation and lies so carefully built they nearly worked. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me like it was the first time it had ever really been mine. The place still smelled faintly like the lavender cleaner Mom used. I wandered through the rooms, touching the walls, the furniture, the pictures, relearning my own home as something safe again. Later that evening, I sat at my father's old desk, the one with the deep scratches near the drawer from where I'd once slammed it shut too hard as a teenager. I ran my fingers across the wood, opened the bottom drawer, and found the little journal he used to write in when he couldn't sleep. He'd always been a quiet man, reserved, not cold, but guarded. He didn't say, "I love you" much, but he showed it. In gestures, in coffee made just the way I liked it, in staying up late to proofread my essays, in repairing broken cabinet hinges without ever mentioning it. And in that voicemail, that one last act of protection, buried in the journal's final pages was a note. Scrawled, uneven handwriting, probably during his last few days. If David comes around again, don't trust him. He's not the same. Something changed. Don't let him fool you with smiles. You're stronger than you think, kiddo. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest. It was strange, grieving and healing at the same time. Winning the case hadn't erased the loss. My parents were still gone. The loneliness hadn't vanished, but the bitterness, that had started to lift. I spent the next few weeks cleaning out the attic, organizing old boxes, finding little pieces of my parents in everything they left behind. Notes, photos, old birthday cards. The media caught wind of the story. Voicemail from the grave exposes inheritance scam. I refused every interview. I didn't want my life turned into another headline. David, on the other hand, had no choice. He was now the subject of a criminal investigation. His mugshot was all over the local news. Slicked back hair, blank expression, that same smugness wiped clean. I never went to the arraignment. I didn't need to see him again. Ken, the friend who had once doubted me, called a few days after the ruling. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't believe you. I should have. Your dad would have been proud." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I replied, "I think he was already proud. He just didn't know how to say it." I took a long walk that evening, through the neighborhood, past the park where Dad used to push me on the swings, past Mrs. Clark's porch where she was rocking gently in her chair with a blanket on her lap. She waved. I waved back. It felt like everything had gone quiet in a good way, like a storm had passed, and I could finally hear myself think again. And yet, part of me still checked the locks twice, still startled at unexpected knocks, still listened for the voicemail on nights when I couldn't sleep. Not because I doubted the outcome, but because hearing Dad's voice reminded me who I was, who he believed I was, who I had to fight to prove I still could be. The hardest part wasn't the trial. It was realizing how easily people had been willing to believe the worst about me, how thin trust could be, even with family. How quickly a charming lie could outshine a quiet truth. But that voicemail, that one voicemail, meant for no one but me, had torn down a wall of deception brick by brick. It reminded me that sometimes truth doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real. And once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. You can't unknow what someone really is. And you sure as hell can't let them take what was never theirs. 6 months later, the house finally felt like home again. I'd painted the living room the color Mom always wanted but never got around to. I replaced the broken porch light. I planted her favorite tulips in the front yard, the ones she used to cut and arrange on the kitchen windowsill every spring. The court case faded into a footnote in local history. David took a plea deal. Fraud, perjury, attempted theft. 18 months in county jail and a hefty fine. He tried to contact me once through a third party, claiming he wanted to apologize. I never replied. Some things don't deserve closure. Mrs. Clark still waved from her porch every morning. She'd become something of a local hero for standing up in court. Strangers had sent her thank you letters. One local bakery even gave her free scones every Saturday. "I didn't do anything special," she told me once. sipping tea on my porch. I just told the truth, I nodded. That's rare enough these days. As for me, I started rebuilding. Work came back slowly. Clients returned. I even picked up a new gig helping a nonprofit with their branding. It felt good. Solid. Earned. But the house was everything. Every creak of the floorboards, every photograph on the wall, every rustle of wind through the hallway reminded me of them. One night, as I was reorganizing old files in Dad's desk, I found something I hadn't seen before. A USB drive. It was taped beneath the drawer, hidden behind a loose wooden panel. I stared at it for a long time before plugging it into my laptop. There were 3 audio files. Each one was a message from Dad. The first was a recording of him talking about the will, how he'd had doubts about how people might act after he passed, how he wanted to be clear. If you're listening to this, he said, I guess something happened. I hope you're okay, and I hope you remember I never wanted any of this to become ugly, but I also didn't want you to be blindsided. David, he's not the same kid he used to be. He's clever now. Dangerous in the way smart liars are. Don't let him charm you. The second file was about me. He talked about how proud he was, how he knew I'd take care of the house, the memories, the history, how he wished he'd said it more often. You're stronger than you think, and kinder than most. I wish I'd told you that sooner. By the third file, his voice was weaker, slower, but calm. Whatever happens, kiddo, remember this house isn't just bricks and paint. It's love. It's roots. You're the only person who understood that. That's why I left it to you. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I sat there for over an hour, just listening on repeat, tears sliding down my cheeks. It wasn't the kind of closure people write books about. There were no dramatic confessions, no revelations of secret fortunes, just love, plain and honest, and a father doing everything he could, even in his last days, to protect the child he trusted most. A few weeks later, I started something new. I used part of the house to open a small community creative space, something Mom had always dreamed of. A place where kids could paint, writers could gather, people could just be. I called it Carter House. It wasn't big, but it was full of light, and people smiled when they walked through the door. The plaque near the entrance reads, "For those who speak the truth, even when no one wants to hear it." Sometimes I still listen to the voicemail, not because I need proof anymore, but because that voice, his voice, reminds me of everything we survived. David once said no one would believe me, that a voicemail wasn't enough. He was wrong. It was more than enough, because it wasn't just evidence. It was a father's love, frozen in time. And love like that, it speaks louder than lies ever will.